Today's video, we have some pretty significant injuries to take a look at for some NHL clubs and how it might impact their futures. We have some NHL rumors focusing on the Predators, the Canucks, and the Senators. And I also want to take a look at a very interesting article taking a look at some potential landing spots for Taylor Hall should New Jersey not be able to re-sign him. We'll take a look at all that coming up next. So welcome back here to Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, we have a lot of news to cover today, so let's dive right in. Now, I want to take a look at a couple of injury situations that could really have some pretty significant impacts on a couple of NHL clubs. Last night, we saw goaltender Devan Dubnyk leave the game against the Edmonton Oilers with an apparent head injury after hitting his head pretty hard after a collision in the crease. So that certainly could have some big impacts on the Minnesota Wild. Now, Alex Stalock was able to come in relief and preserve the victory and get the joint shutout between Dubnyk and Stalock. They did shut the Oilers out with a 3-0 win, which really, considering how the Oilers have been playing and the Wild have been playing, was a little bit of a surprise victory. The Wild had a pretty overall solid game, a pretty strong defensive effort, and got some decent goaltending to secure the win. Obviously, in my opinion, Stalock's played better than Dubnyk so far in limited amount of action, so this might give him a chance to run with it. And as much as you don't want Dubnyk to be hurt, obviously you're always concerned for their safety, especially with potential concussions. But in this case, for the team and for their ability to possibly turn things around, maybe giving Stalock an extended look in the net certainly might give the team a boost. Might give them a little bit more of a positive vibe on the team. They've been playing better when he's been in the crease. So I guess we will see how that situation unfolds and how that impacts the Wild going forward. Now, we also saw what appears to be a pretty significant injury to Mikko Rantanen, who hurt his ankle as well. It certainly turned in a way that is not normal and looked like it could be serious. Of course, the Avalanche are not really saying a whole lot at this point. They did some MRIs and some testing, and we're just waiting for some results and for an update from the club before we really know any further. Some people are saying it could be day to day, but more than likely week to week. But it's really difficult to say. I guess we'll find out if there's anything broken or just a really bad sprain or whatnot. But even a really bad ankle sprain as well can take several weeks sometimes to really fully heal and recover. So I guess we'll see how that goes. But if Rantanen's out for an extended time for the Avalanche, he's been playing extremely well. That will certainly have an impact there, and they've had a really solid start to their season. So I guess those are situations worth monitoring to see how those teams are impacted by those situations. Now, jumping into the latest NHL trade rumors, I want to take a look at a couple situations unfolding here. One as well with the Nashville Predators. Now, it doesn't mean this is going to lead to a trade, but until a contract extension gets negotiated and signed with Roman Josi, there's always going to be some speculation. Now, the latest NHL Insider Trading edition on TSN, Pierre LeBrun was discussing the Josi situation with the Predators, and that basically there's been a snag that's been hit since the end of the season, which we discussed a little bit before. Let's have a little bit more details now. Basically, LeBrun indicates that Josi and his agency are looking for a contract to make him about the third highest paid defenseman in the NHL, which would put him the third highest behind Erik Karlsson and Drew Doughty, which would probably put his salary somewhere between $10.5 to $10.9 million. That's a significant amount of money. I personally think Roman Josi is an excellent defenseman. He's really underrated and has been a great guy, a great captain for the Predators team. So they certainly value him. I think he's certainly somebody they want to keep in the fold longer term, but that's getting a little bit expensive, especially if you take a look at their overall salary cap situation. Now, heading into next season, the Predators already have contracts for 13 NHL players, around $59 million. So that's a lot of money. You add a 14th player like Josi, making, $10.5 million or more dollars. That puts their salary cap situation around $70 million for 14 players. Does not leave a ton of room to round out the remainder of their roster for an additional 7 or 8, 9 players. So that's certainly a situation where the Predators are certainly not there yet and willing to offer that kind of money to Josi as much as they do want to sign him, and they do very much value him and what he brings to the organization. So LeBrun's indicating that there's basically at a standstill right now, and we'll see what happens. Now, of course, in my opinion, this could lead to more trade rumors as well, for not only for Josi, but for other members of the Predators, because I really don't think the Predators are going to want to get to a point where they really want to trade him, but they do have some other players that we've discussed recently that would make a lot of sense, and that mainly includes center iceman Kyle Turris, who's making $6 million with still a number of years left on his contract, basically playing a bottom six, most nights a fourth line roll, which is really a lot of money for that kind of roster spot. Obviously, since he's come into the organization, they've also signed Matt Duchene, who's certainly playing ahead of him, as well as Ryan Johansson, Nick Bonino, and they have other guys who can play center as well that are often playing the wing right now. So it's certainly a situation where Turris is very much expendable. He's had a couple of decent games for the Preds this year, but overall, like I said, mostly playing a smaller role for the team. So it's kind of an expensive contract. It's something that's no secret David Poile was trying to trade over the offseason, but was not successful. As the season kind of gets a little bit past the 15 to 20 game mark, you're going to see teams that are surprisingly doing well, some teams that are surprisingly not doing so well, and it might be looking to shake things up. There's always some surprises and teams that are going to be looking for some pieces that might not want to wait forever to get a deal done to kind of salvage their season or get back to where they thought they would be. So personally, I think the Predators' best way to keep Josi would be to trade Kyle Turris, free up the space, which I think is something they should really look to do anyway. But if they really want to have a good chance at signing Josi, I think it's really that much more necessary to have it done sooner than later so they can really get a better, clearer picture of their cap situation moving forward. Now, regarding the Vancouver Canucks, there's been some reports that Troy Stecher and his agency might not be overly fond of his ice time right now. Of course, in the past, Troy Stecher was predominantly a top four defenseman with Vancouver, but as of right now, with all the moves they've made and the addition of youngster like Quinn Hughes, Stecher is no longer a top four guy. They're a lot deeper team overall, a lot deeper on the blue line, and now he's getting deployed as a third pair defenseman. On insider trading, they were indicating that the Canucks are really not overly interested in trading Troy Stecher, but there might be some, like I said, some unhappiness on his side for the ice time, and I'm not sure if it'll ever get to a point where he'll request a trade, but LeBron mentioned that it's certainly a situation that's worth monitoring. That's something that we could see, but obviously when you add Tyler Myers, you add Jordy Ben, you have the youngster Quinn Hughes taking a more full-time regular spot, it certainly pushes a lot of people down the depth chart, which is, Stecher's one of those guys. We saw it happen to Ben Hutton, who was not offered his qualifying offer and became a free agent and left town. So Stecher's, not quite in that boat, but obviously, it's something that he's going to have to deal with. If he wants to remain in Vancouver, he's going to have to play lower in the lineup for right now, because that's just the way things go. But of course, it's a long season. You can always run into injuries. So therefore, the Canucks, like I said, are not eager to trade him. But it's just a situation that LeBron feels is worth monitoring, that he might get unhappy to the point where perhaps he could request a trade later in the year, depending on how everything goes. Now, they also touched base on the Ottawa Senators. As we know, they've struggled mightily to start the season, and to most of us, that's really not a whole heck of a lot of a surprise. We expected the Senators to struggle. We expected them to have some more growing pains. We expected them to be near the bottom of the standings, but according to Darren Dreger, he feels that the Senators are struggling more than even they expected, and they want to be more competitive, so they're certainly looking to make some upgrades at the forward position. They have a ton of young, promising prospect forwards, and a lot of them just appear to be not quite ready yet and need some more seasoning in the American Hockey League, so they want to remain patient with those players. They want to give them the necessary time they need in the AHL to play bigger roles, have an expanded time down there to really make sure they're ready when they bring them up for a full-time action. They acquired Vladislav Nemestikov earlier from the Rangers, and he's worked out quite nicely. He's been a bit of a steal, and they're looking for basically a Nemestikov 2.0 is how they phrased it, another type of forward who might be struggling elsewhere but has a lot of potential to come in for a small price tag, probably on a shorter term, 1 to 2 year contract, preferably probably a 1 year, so they can kind of do a trial experiment here, see if he's going to work out, and if so, consider signing him beyond that, or if not, an asset that they could then turn around and flip at the deadline to gather some more picks to continue this rebuild. Either way, they can get a forward like Nemestikov for a small price tag. Wouldn't be surprising to see them do that, and depending on how everything goes with Nemestikov, it wouldn't be shocking as well to see them maybe flip him again at the deadline to gather some more picks to continue this build as they move forward here. I mean, the Senators really, I know they want to be more competitive. That might be coming from the fact that attendance is down, and maybe Mr. Melnick is trying to, get some more butts in the seats and make this team more competitive. But realistically, in my opinion, as a fan of this team, I think they should really just continue here with the kids, give them more opportunity, get that high draft pick, and maybe they'd be lucky enough to gather the first overall pick. And then, of course, they could have the opportunity to possibly draft first overall and get Alexis Lafreniere, of course, who's a French-speaking Canadian forward who would fit very well with that organization. It might be the top player that they're desperately missing right now. So that's what I would do if I was the Senators, but they're reportedly looking to be more competitive and grab another forward like Nemestikov if they can find one. Now, of course, as I mentioned, there's an article on Sportsnet from Luke Fox outlining some what he feels are potential destinations for Taylor Hall should the Devils not be able to re-sign their star forward, and if they do explore trading him later into the season. Now, of course, the Devils had a really slow start, which has fueled a lot of the speculation. I know the Devils had a really nice looking offseason, or at least what appeared to be, but things have not worked out so far. Now there's obviously, they went from a lot of talk about Taylor Hall likely signing and staying to maybe they'll move him if they can't, build this thing into being a regular playoff contender, because ultimately that's what Taylor Hall wants. He's, far enough into his career that he does not want to be missing the playoffs on a regular basis. He wants to be part of a team and an organization who is competitive year after year, and he can have a shot to be a playoff player and have a shot at winning a Stanley Cup, which ultimately is what most players should want anyway. So it's understandable from his perspective why that's so important to him, and if the Devils can't provide that, then they may have to move on depending on how everything goes. Now, of course, we're not really saying this is a trade rumor that they're going to trade him or that there's talk that they will. This is just a hypothetical situation from Luke Fox at Sportsnet, indicating where he feels will be the most likely destinations or the teams that are best prepared to take on a player like him should he become available. The first one would be the Colorado Avalanche. Now, the Avs are an interesting team here to watch, especially with Rantanen being injured right now. Obviously, that's not expected to be too long term, so likely wouldn't force a trade of this magnitude. But the Avalanche have the most cap space. They have a ton of young, interesting players, a lot of assets. They'd be well positioned to take on a player like Taylor Hall. And can you only imagine adding a player, a dynamic playmaking winger like him to this lineup in that top six forward group that already boasts Nathan MacKinnon, Rantanen, and Landeskog? Think about the possibilities of Hall playing with MacKinnon would be crazy. Obviously, they probably could break up their other line, maybe spread the offense out a little bit more. And maybe the Avalanche, who's had a really strong start, might be that one piece that's missing to really get them over the top and make them a serious cup contender. So certainly an interesting thing to think about for sure. Secondly, he put in the Montreal Canadiens. Now, the Habs are a team that's been looking for that marquee scorer for the past couple of years. They tried to get in on the John Tavares sweepstakes when he was a top UFA 2 years ago. Could not get an interview. He wasn't considering Montreal, which was something that they were heavily speculated on being interested in leading up to free agency, but could not get an interview to have them consider joining the Montreal Canadiens. So that did not work out. Then, of course, we saw them try to offer sheet Sebastian Aho this past offseason, only to have the Hurricanes match. It's certainly no secret that Marc Bergevin wants to add a top scorer. Preferably, I think somebody who can play center was what he's been looking for. But at the same time, when a player like Taylor Hall becomes available, I think all NHL teams need to take a look at it. They have a pretty good cap situation right now. They have a ton of assets when it comes to young players and prospects, and even prospects that are not in North America or signed yet, that they could consider packaging up for a player like this. Certainly, like I said, they could greatly use another playmaking top scorer like Taylor Hall. So I think the Montreal Canadiens would be an excellent destination that would be in a situation to be able to obtain him. Now, like I said, I'm not sure that this is going to happen. This is just hypothetical here, but I do think Montreal's well positioned to get in on those sweepstakes should that actually go down. And the third team was the surprising Anaheim Ducks, who were off to a great start, and their new head coach, Dallas Eakins, is looking like a pretty good selection right now for a head coach and somebody who might contend, for Coach of the Year, because it usually tends to go to a team who really surprised and had their coach really help turn things around. Obviously, they're in a situation as well where they had some aging players that they're slowly starting to move out. We saw with the Corey Perry buyout of this offseason. They've been speculated to maybe be considered trading Andre Kasha before. They have plenty of other young players as well, like Comtois and Steele and Terry and Jones, all kinds of guys they could consider maybe packaging up and move one of them with maybe a pick or another veteran or something like that. They have all kinds of really good assets, I think, that could get them into the trade market for a player of this magnitude. You add Taylor Hall into the mix in Anaheim, and suddenly that really drastically looks how they are as a team and makes them that much more competitive too. So those are the three teams, according to Luke Fox, that he feels are most well positioned to land Taylor Hall should the trade market open up and the Devils decide to go down that road. So, of course, as always, I want to know what your thoughts are. If Taylor Hall does end up being traded, which of these destinations do you think makes the most sense? And I'd love to hear some of your mock trades down in the comment section so we can discuss further. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content. And give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it as well. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.